Ethan lived in a quiet coastal town in Maine, where the breeze always carried memories of decades gone by. Once known as the life of every gathering, Ethan was the kind of man who'd show up to birthdays uninvited just to bring laughter, who'd drive for hours just to share a pot of coffee with an old friend. His calendar used to be filled with visits, reunions, and neighborhood get-togethers. But now at 74, something had shifted. He found himself hesitating before picking up the phone, wondering if driving across town was really worth the effort. His cozy home had become his sanctuary. The fireplace crackled with comfort, and his favorite armchair felt like an old friend. These days, peace came in simpler forms. The sound of gulls in the morning, the smell of cinnamon in his kitchen, and the joy of a handwritten letter rather than small talk over coffee. To some, it might seem like Ethan was pulling away. But the truth was, he was growing inward, choosing intention over obligation, depth over distraction. And in that stillness, he began to understand. Real connection isn't measured by distance traveled, but by the love and peace it leaves behind. 2. For years, Ethan believed that showing up was the ultimate expression of love. Birthdays, anniversaries, even casual dinners. He rarely said no. Whether it was a last-minute invite or a planned reunion, he made sure his presence was felt. His friends often praised him for being so dependable, and that became his identity. But time has a way of reshaping what once seemed like constants. It all changed one gray November afternoon. He had just returned home from a cousin's retirement party, a 2-hour drive each way. The gathering was crowded, loud, and filled with distant relatives he barely recognized. People exchanged pleasantries, but the conversations were surface level, laced with small talk and strained laughter. Ethan sat quietly near the corner of the room, sipping his punch, glancing at his watch more than he cared to admit. On the drive home, rain tapped steadily against the windshield, mirroring the tired ache in his bones. His hands clenched the steering wheel as the sky darkened, and a quiet thought floated to the surface. Why am I still doing this? He couldn't shake it. That night, curled under his favorite quilt with a cup of chamomile tea, Ethan replayed the afternoon. Not a single moment had stirred genuine joy in him. He felt unseen, exhausted, like he was performing a role that no longer fit. That's when it hit him. He was no longer attending these events out of love. He was doing it out of guilt, habit, and the fear of disappointing others. In the days that followed, he began to notice just how often he sacrificed his energy for the sake of appearances. There were dinners that drained him, conversations that felt obligatory, and visits that left him feeling lonelier than if he'd stayed home. He remembered how often he'd come home emotionally depleted, sitting in silence with the TV on just for background noise. The turning point came when he received an invitation to an old friend's get-together, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. He looked at the envelope, thought about the drive, the unfamiliar crowd, and the mental toll it might take. Then gently, he set the invite aside. Instead, he called Charlotte, his childhood friend, someone who always made him feel at ease. They talked for over an hour, laughed about shared memories, and promised to meet at a quiet cafe nearby the following week. That decision changed everything. It wasn't about cutting people off. It was about choosing the kind of peace he once thought he had to earn. The moment Ethan realized that he didn't owe everyone his presence was the moment he started reclaiming his joy. And strangely, life didn't get lonelier. It got lighter, calmer, more intentional. 3. A week after Ethan decided to skip the old friend's party, he received an unexpected knock at his door. It was Olivia, his neighbor from 2 houses down. A gentle woman in her late 60s, Olivia was always kind, but never someone Ethan had grown close to. She stood on the porch with a small covered dish in her hands and a worried look in her eyes. "Hi, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "I hope I'm not intruding. I just didn't know who else to talk to." He invited her in without hesitation. As they sat in his warm kitchen, the rain starting to fall again outside, Olivia explained that her husband had been moved into a memory care facility just days ago. The house felt too big now, too quiet, too empty. "I saw your lights on last night," she whispered, barely above a breath, "and I thought maybe you'd understand." Ethan listened, really listened, in a way he hadn't in a long time. No distractions, no ticking clock. Just two people, sitting in shared stillness, bonded by the invisible threads of aging and grief. As Olivia poured out her story, something shifted in Ethan. This wasn't one of those obligatory visits filled with fake smiles and chatter. This was real, raw, human. He made tea. They didn't speak for long stretches of time, and yet something sacred unfolded in the silence. For the first time in months, Ethan felt truly useful again. Not because he was showing up to impress anyone or crossing names off a list, but because someone needed his presence, not his performance. In the following days, their visits became a quiet routine. Sometimes they'd walk to the park together. Sometimes they'd sit in Ethan's backyard watching the birds. No agenda, no effort, just companionship. The beauty of it stunned him. It was the kind of bond that didn't ask for much, but gave back more than he expected. And that's when the unexpected realization struck him hardest. He hadn't stopped needing connection. He had just outgrown the wrong kind. The world had told him that being social meant being busy, that friendship was measured in invitations and RSVPs. But Olivia reminded him that real connection could arrive quietly, wearing a cardigan, carrying a casserole, and asking for a place to be heard. This simple act of opening his door, both literally and metaphorically, reminded Ethan that the heart doesn't age the way the body does. It still longs to be seen, to be useful, to be part of something genuine. And he understood then that even though he'd pulled back from the noise of the social world, it hadn't closed him off. It had opened him up to stillness, to purpose, and to unexpected companionship. Before Olivia knocked on his door, Ethan believed pulling away from social life meant choosing solitude over connection. But as their quiet friendship blossomed, his perspective began to shift in the most unexpected way. He realized it wasn't about stopping social interaction. It was about redefining it. For so many years, Ethan had equated relationships with effort, the energy of showing up, the buzz of crowded rooms, the endless cycles of talking, smiling, and pretending to be more present than he truly felt. But sitting beside Olivia on his porch, sipping mint tea as the sun dipped behind the trees, he experienced something deeper, connection without performance. The change was subtle at first. He stopped feeling guilty for not attending neighborhood barbecues or church functions. The guilt, he noticed, wasn't actually his. It was inherited from years of being told that to love is to be available. But now he saw clearly, availability doesn't always mean showing up physically. Sometimes it means making space emotionally, in the right place, with the right people. One evening, as autumn leaves scattered the street outside, Ethan sat with his old photo albums, dusty reminders of a different time. He came across a picture of himself at a New Year's party from 15 years ago. surrounded by smiling faces, clinking glasses, and glittering decorations. He looked happy, but he remembered how tired he was that night, how he had left early, overwhelmed by the noise. The smile in the photo had been real, but forced. That night had been a show. Now he smiled again, this time softly, alone in the comfort of his home, without needing to prove anything to anyone. This was the core of his new perspective. Presence isn't about being seen, it's about feeling known. That simple truth rewired something deep within him. He didn't need to chase friendships to feel connected. He didn't need to fill his calendar to feel purposeful. He didn't need to say yes out of habit. Every no he gave now made space for something more meaningful. A walk in the woods, a letter to an old friend, or simply a peaceful evening by the fire. His relationships began to reflect this clarity too. The people who truly mattered didn't mind the slower rhythm. Some even thanked him for reaching out more intentionally, for being fully there when he was, and for modeling a life that didn't revolve around approval. Ethan wasn't retreating from the world. He was returning to himself. And in that return, he found a deeper connection to others than he ever had in the crowded rooms of his past. He had traded noise for nuance, busyness for balance, performance for presence. And somehow, in doing less, he began to feel more connected than ever before. One crisp morning in early spring, as light spilled through the kitchen window and danced across his checkered tablecloth, Ethan received a handwritten letter, a rarity these days. It was from his granddaughter, Layla, a college freshman who had always adored her Papa E. She wrote, "I miss our talks. I know we don't see each other much, but I've been thinking, would you want to do a video chat once a week? I'd love to hear your stories again." Ethan smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. His relationship with Layla had been one of quiet admiration. He never imposed, never demanded attention, but clearly their bond had never faded. This simple note cracked open a door he didn't even know he wanted to walk through. The chance to connect across generations without having to leave the comfort of home. He replied the same day, and that Sunday they had their first virtual call. Layla sat cross-legged in a dorm room filled with posters and laundry, while Ethan leaned back in his favorite chair with a mug of warm cider. They talked for over an hour. Layla asked about his youth, his first job, how he met her grandmother. Ethan found himself laughing, remembering long-forgotten moments, moments that felt fresh again as he spoke them aloud. And to his surprise, Layla wasn't just listening. She was captivated. She wrote things down, asked follow-up questions, and thanked him for every story. By the time they said goodbye, Ethan felt something stirring in him. Purpose. A kind he hadn't felt since retiring a decade ago. That conversation became a weekly ritual. Over time, Layla encouraged him to record his stories. With her help, Ethan began compiling short audio clips, which she later turned into a digital archive titled Letters from Papa. Eventually, Layla shared it with her classmates. To Ethan's astonishment, dozens of students responded, thanking him for the wisdom, the humor, the warmth. And just like that, a new opportunity emerged, one that didn't require noisy parties or draining obligations. Through a screen, Ethan was mentoring a generation that longed for authenticity. His quieter lifestyle, once seen as withdrawal, had now become a wellspring of value. He even started offering short reflection sessions with the local library's community group. Virtually, of course. Once a month, he'd join a round table of elders sharing memories and insights with younger attendees. It was connection, but reimagined. This chapter of Ethan's life wasn't marked by slowing down. It was marked by refocusing, by choosing connection on his terms, in environments that preserved his energy and nourished his spirit. He no longer needed to be out there to feel involved. He had simply stepped into a new kind of presence, quieter, deeper, and just as meaningful. In embracing stillness, Ethan had unlocked a powerful truth, that new doors can open at any age, especially when you stop chasing the old ones. 6. In the months that followed his first video call with Layla, Ethan's life took on a different rhythm. Slower, yes, but richer in ways he'd never anticipated. His days were no longer filled with obligations, but with small rituals that felt sacred. Morning walks along the shoreline, a notebook always in his pocket for when memories surfaced. Afternoon tea in his garden, where he often sat reflecting beneath the old maple tree. Evenings spent recording stories into a simple microphone Layla had mailed him. But the greatest change wasn't in his schedule, it was in his soul. Ethan had always carried a quiet pressure to keep up, with friends, with family, with the world. There was a time when missing a birthday party left him feeling guilty, or when skipping Sunday brunch with the neighbors made him worry about seeming rude. But now he chose himself, gently, respectfully, but firmly. This wasn't selfishness, it was self-respect. He started saying no, with grace, and yes, with intention. And surprisingly, the people in his life responded not with disappointment, but with deeper appreciation. The relationships that mattered most grew stronger, more honest, more mutual. One afternoon, Olivia, now one of his dearest friends, told him something that made his heart swell. "You've taught me something, Ethan," she said, setting down her teacup. "You've shown me that it's okay to be still, that choosing peace doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're finally showing up for yourself." That stayed with him. And it wasn't just Olivia who noticed. His son, who used to worry about Ethan's quiet lifestyle, began calling more just to chat, not out of concern but curiosity. His former colleagues invited him to share his wisdom at a virtual retirement seminar, where dozens of people tuned in to hear his stories about aging with intention. Ethan had gone from fearing he was fading into the background to realizing he had never been more visible, at least to the people who truly saw him. Growth didn't mean becoming someone new. It meant becoming more of who he truly was. He no longer needed to measure his life in events attended or social boxes checked. Instead, he measured it in peace, in connection, in moments of real presence. He found strength in his boundaries, joy in his solitude, and purpose in his storytelling. And perhaps most beautifully, he stopped trying to hold on to relationships that had long since drifted. Not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Each goodbye made space for something more aligned, more honest. Ethan had grown in the most unexpected way, by shrinking the noise around him so he could finally hear the quiet wisdom within. He wasn't less connected, he was more grounded. And in that grounding, he rediscovered what it meant to truly live. 7. The wind rolled softly through the trees as Ethan stood on his back porch, watching the golden hues of the setting sun wrap the horizon in warmth. Birds flitted from branch to branch. The smell of freshly turned earth from his garden drifted up, grounding him. It was in this moment, quiet, unremarkable to the outside world, that Ethan fully understood how much his life had transformed. He hadn't set out to reinvent himself. He wasn't chasing change or grasping for purpose. He had simply started honoring the stillness, and in doing so, had uncovered a deeper kind of truth. He no longer feared being alone because he had discovered the richness of solitude. He no longer worried about disappointing others because he had learned to stop disappointing himself. And most of all, he had realized that presence didn't require proximity. Ethan had become more connected than ever, to his past through stories, to the present through intention, and to the future through the legacy he was quietly crafting in the lives he touched. Whether it was Layla, who had started a podcast called Wisdom in Quiet Places, or Olivia, who had found the courage to restart painting after years of silence, Ethan's influence had rippled outward, not loudly but deeply. His house, once a quiet retreat from the world, had become a sanctuary of meaningful connection, not through foot traffic or visitors, but through heartfelt conversations, letters exchanged, and shared silences that spoke volumes. He had discovered what many people spend a lifetime chasing: peace without performance. There was a time when Ethan feared becoming invisible, when missing a dinner invite or turning down a gathering felt like fading away. But now he stood on his porch, arms crossed gently, and felt fuller than he ever had in a crowded room. Because the truth is, we don't grow distant with age. We grow selective. We don't love less. We love more intentionally. We don't stop connecting. We begin connecting more authentically. Ethan's journey wasn't about pulling away. It was about realignment, reclaiming time, reconnecting on a deeper level, and rediscovering what it meant to feel alive, not through constant movement, but through meaningful stillness. So to anyone feeling like they've started to step back, like they're drifting from people or traditions, take heart. You're not disappearing, you're evolving. And just like Ethan, you may find that the quiet chapters of life are the ones where your soul finally speaks the loudest. Because in a world that often values noise and presence, it takes real courage to choose peace, and in doing so, become more present than ever before. The greatest wisdom that comes with age isn't about knowing more. It's about understanding what truly matters. Ethan's journey teaches us that stepping back isn't a sign of isolation, but an act of intentional living. In a world that constantly pushes us to stay connected, show up, and be seen, it takes strength to pause and ask, is this adding peace to my life? The real beauty of growing older is the permission to choose, to prioritize stillness over performance, to cherish a quiet cup of tea with a dear friend over a crowded room of acquaintances. To know that your value isn't determined by how often you appear, but by how authentically you show up, when it counts, and for the people who truly matter. True connection doesn't demand your presence, it honors your peace. And there's nothing more powerful than a life lived with that kind of clarity. If you find yourself hesitating before accepting invitations or choosing rest over gatherings, honor that instinct. You don't owe your time to everyone. Begin evaluating your social life through a new lens. Does this experience nourish me or drain me? Consider creating intentional time blocks, moments reserved for people and activities that uplift your spirit. Invite a friend over for a slow lunch, send a handwritten letter, or start a personal journal to reconnect with your own voice. You might even try what Ethan did, sharing your stories with younger family members or a local group online. Most importantly, remind yourself, it's okay to change. Your needs, priorities, and energy levels are evolving. And that's not only natural, It's beautiful. Live intentionally, love deeply, choose peace always.